In this movie, we're going to look at some additional aspects of communication diagrams. We'll look in more detail at how you show loops and conditions and how you might number messages in communication diagrams, and then at a couple of additional pieces of notation in messages. Messages that will repeat in a loop in a communication diagram are marked with an asterisk or star, followed by an iteration clause in square brackets before the colon of the sequence expression. The UML specification doesn't prescribe any format for the actual loop conditions, so you can use whatever pseudocode or snippets of program code you like, though you should be consistent within your model or abide by organizational standards. Here are some examples. The first is a loop counter called I, going from 0 to number of events minus 1. The second is a while condition, while found is not equal to true. And the last one is a loop counter in a different format from the first. Messages whose sending is dependent on some condition are marked by a guard in square brackets before the colon of the sequence expression. Again, UML doesn't prescribe any standard, so you can use any pseudocode or program snippet you like, though you should be consistent within your model or abide by organizational standards. Here are some examples. The first depends on whether a timeout has occurred. The second tests whether found is equal to true, while the last tests whether event is not equal to null. The UML specification doesn't prescribe how to number messages as long as the sequence is clear. The simplest approach is just to number each message within a diagram in a sequence. One common approach is to treat each new message coming from the actor, or whatever lifeline initiates the interaction, as a new number, and then add decimal numbering after that. Another approach is to add additional levels of numbering for each level of depth away from the start point. So each time a message comes from a new object in the interaction, a new point and number sequence is added. Bear in mind that not all tools will support all the different ways of doing things. Here's an example of the first of those, with sequential numbering of each message. The first message is 1, the second 2, and so on. Very straightforward. Here's an example of the second approach. Messages 1, 2, and 3 come from the actor. All the messages number 1 dot something follow on from 1. All those numbered 3 dot something follow on from 3. The third approach starts like the previous one, but each level of depth of the message sending adds an extra dot or point and a sequence of numbers. So what was 3, 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 in the previous example is 3, 3.1, 3.1.1 and 3.1.2 in this one. Finally, if messages in a loop could be sent in parallel, then you can add 2 bars after the asterisk before the square brackets. It's also possible to use a letter instead of a number, where there is a branch and the sending of messages depends on a condition. However, the specification says one thing and gives an example of another, so either this format or this one can be used. Now let's add some loops and conditions in Enterprise Architect and look at the numbering system. Here we are in Enterprise Architect, so we're going to create a new interaction in the interaction view with a communication diagram in it. The communication diagram will be a variation on process schedule, which we've already drawn as a sequence diagram. We'll create a package and we'll call it process schedule CD. Then we'll create an interaction within it. I'll give the interaction the same name as the package. Enterprise Architect has automatically created a sequence diagram. We don't want a sequence diagram, so I'll delete that. Instead, I'm going to add a communication diagram. I'll call it process schedule CD. It'll be a UML behavioral diagram, and it will be a communication diagram. Okay, so here's our new communication diagram. In this version of process schedule, I'm assuming that more than one timed event may start at the same time in a schedule. So I'm adding all the ones that are found into a collection and returning that. This is one of the things that typically happens during analysis using communication diagrams and sequence diagrams. The need for additional classes, like this collection, becomes apparent, and they get added into the class diagram as part of the process. So I need 3 lifelines in this diagram. I click on Object in the toolbox and on the diagram, and I add Schedule, and I set this to be of the type Schedule, Advanced, Instance Classifier, and I find Schedule in the main package. The next one I'm to call Events I in square brackets, of type Timed Event. And the third one is going to be Event Collection, and I'll add the new class Event Collection into the model. Because it doesn't already exist in the model, I can select the package I want it to go into and click Add New. I type in the name of the class, the type is class, I save that. I click OK, and I've added the lifeline or object event collection of the new type event collection into my diagram. I need links from schedule to itself, to events I, and to event collection. Now I'll add the message get timed event I with a loop iteration clause of I equals 0 ... number of events minus 1 in the condition field. I click on the link, add message from schedule to schedule. So this is going to be get timed event, taking the argument I, and it will return a timed event. I need to check the checkbox is iteration, and I'll type in here my condition, I equals 0 ... number of events minus 1. I'll move the link up to the top so we can see that more clearly. You can see that the asterisk and the condition in square brackets have been added to the message. Next, I'll add a message to events I to get the value of its time attribute. I'm adding a message from schedule to events I. The message is get time, and I'll assign the result to event time. The last message is a message to event collection, which is add, and with the argument of events I. This has a condition, and the condition is that the time of the event is equal to the current time. So event time equals now. Again, you can see the guard condition that's been entered in square brackets as part of the message. So we've got a loop on schedule, and then within that loop, we've got it getting the time from the timed event and, dependent on this condition, adding the timed event into the collection. I can do various things with the numbering here. To access the numbering, I can either right-click on one of the messages or on the background of the diagram and select Sequence Communication Messages. The same option is available in the diagram menu in the menu bar under Advanced. You'll see that by default, EA has started a new group for the first message. To switch that off, I need to come out of this and go into the dialog box for that first message. You'll see that the Start New Group checkbox is checked. I'll uncheck that and you can see the result. So now it's numbered them 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. I'll change that back. So it's changed them back to 1, 1.1, 1.2. Within this dialog for the sequencing of communication messages, I can change the order of messages. If I select Add and use the upward pointing finger button, I can swap Add and Get Time around. You can see when I exit from the dialog box that now Add is 1.1 and Get Time is 1.2. I'll put that back how it was as well. The other thing I can do is add an extra level of numbering or remove a level of numbering by using the right and left pointing fingers. If I select 1.1 and the right pointing finger, it adds an extra level of numbering. Same 1.2. Again, I don't want that. I want it like that. So, in this chapter, we've explored communication diagrams, which are similar to sequence diagrams in that they model interactions, but have a simpler notation. We've added lifelines or objects with the links between them to diagrams, and then added messages to the links, including loops and conditional messages, and looked at different ways of numbering the messages to represent the order in which they're sent.